So then welcome all to our webinar today, where we will talk about Globalize your IAM with Identity as a Service, challenges, insights, and best practices. With me is my colleague, Tim Hobbs, Cloud Architect from Service Layers. And my name is Tim Bayerlotzer, IAM Consultant at IC Consult. First of all, a few information about IC Consult Group. All of the companies in IC Consult Group are focused on digital identities, but on different parts of the value chain, you could say. XDI 360 is focused on business consulting and data privacy. IC Consult is doing technical consulting and system integration, while IAM Works is focusing on operations, IAM support, and Service Layers is delivering identity as a service based on leading vendors. Here are a few of our certifications where we want to mention the TSAC certification, which is a high security requirement necessary for a few automotive customers like Porsche or Mercedes. Here we have our agenda for today. First of all, we want to talk about the challenges which come with a global identity and access management, and the approaches, how we try to attack these challenges. First of all, why do we need a global identity and access management? Nowadays, the customers we're working for are having distributed users, employees, partners, and customers. And they're working all over the world, and they need to access their applications, whether it's via mobile app or some web applications, whatever. And let's see why it is not enough to just provide one identity and access management system in one region. So our scenario would look like this. We have an IAM system in the EU, and we have a lot of applications distributed worldwide and users which are trying to access it. Wait a second. So let's have a look at the user perspective. First of all, the users in all other regions than the one our IAM system is based on will experience a bad performance because the latency between the regions can be quite high. And the second point is that it's hard to adapt local specifics. For example, if you want to integrate social login into your IAM system, like login via Facebook or WeChat, for example, which might not be wanted in every region. You don't want to use WeChat in the US, but in China, it might be necessary to do this. The second point we want to look at is the application perspective, where we have mostly the performance issue, because when the applications are trying to access identity data at a different region, it might be a very bad performance, which will be negative for the user experience as well. And last but not least, the perspective of the identity provider itself. There might be some legal issues because of data restrictions, and this often requires some technical workarounds to store data in remote locations, which then again causes a bad impact on the performance, all these workarounds, like, for example, local user store, as it's shown in the picture here. So this all leads to one point: decentralized IAM is mandatory. And does a decentralized IAM solve all our problems? Well, apparently not. Some of them, but it also introduces some new problems. Again, let's have a look at the user perspective. If a user is traveling through different regions and is trying to relog in a new region, and the IAM system is not so smart, it might be that the user has to re-register when entering a new region, which might lead to a lot of accounts the user has to manage for the same service, which is not the solution we want to have. Regarding the application perspective, might lead to issues regarding tokens issued by another region. Let's take the example from the previous one that the user is traveling into another region. He wants to access the same application with his mobile application with the tokens he already has saved there. But the IAM system in the new region does not know these tokens. So the application can't access the necessary data. And for the application, these deployments might need some more adjustments, like in the centralized IAM system. And again, the identity provider perspective, it increases the implementation complexity to deploy your solution in different regions with different approaches, maybe with different services you have to integrate. And it introduces an operational overhead. If you have to provide updates to your system, this might be a lot of more work to do. And one important point to mention here is that the support team is most of the cases limited to the local working hours. So if an application wants to integrate into the service, there might be some delays up to 1 day or more until the service can be integrated and can be used by the application. So this is another issue we have here. So we have all these problems here, and what might be the solution? A custom fit identity as a service via service layers. And now I will hand over to my colleague Tim, who can tell you a little bit more about this.
Thanks, Tim. So in the face of all of these challenges, we have realized with all of our experience implementing identity and access management for so many customers for such a long time that we needed something that not only incorporated best of breed products like Ping Identity and ForgeRock, but we needed to combine them with an approach that would fit. And that approach that we've taken is, first of all, to make everything as code from the infrastructure onto the configuration, and combine that with automated deployment and testing to get everything out into the world in all the regions that it's necessary. So we've applied a DevOps approach to the deployment of identity and access management with the ability to highly customize it. So we have a fully automated CI/CD pipeline, so continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline using the DevOps paradigm that's always available, is fully auditable. Every change that comes in from customer requirements, developers of custom components necessary for different regions or different customer requirements, along with the configuration that's performed by our experts or your experts in identity and access management, with the requirements of security auditors and business compliance auditors. These requirements all go into the system as code and into source control. From there, we then put the system together, we build it, we test it, and we deploy it when it's deemed ready by the release manager to a running environment. We can have any number of variations on those requirements and deploy multiple times. So there isn't a requirement to have one system to fit everybody. There is the opportunity to have a very flexible and customizable system that can fit many different scenarios, many different customer requirements. So as we apply the CI/CD pipeline to a running deployment, what do we deploy? Well, we deploy using modern technology into modern data centers, using a bring your own cloud approach or a bring your own Kubernetes approach, where we can deploy into your cloud environment or your Kubernetes clusters, and we will deploy a containerized microservice-based system that is both components and services. So we have different components that can all be built, maintained, and updated separately, exposed as a service-oriented architecture that can be consumed by other components and also by external users or systems. So here you have a good picture of how the people interact with the system that is deployed into a highly available and scalable cluster. It's one thing to scale a cluster in one location or one region, and we recognize very clearly that performance of the application for end users is super important. Also, the constraints around movement of user data between regions can be quite problematic in some cases. And that's why using the same approach and the same automation, we can deploy into any number of locations, geographic locations, or any sort of physical location. And all of these we apply the same way. So we apply the same approach with as much configuration and tuning that is the same as we can. And we then layer that configuration in a tailored way to the regions that need different behavior. So are we ready for production? Well, yes, certainly. So we're already in production with a number of different customers of differing sizes. And this includes the continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline. It includes the layering of custom features for individual users and individual use cases, some of them with business-specific needs that were added into our standard system, layered on top of the core IAM products, Ping Identity or ForgeRock. Around all of this, we apply all best practices with regards to security, everything from the 4 I's principle to the separation of duties to the minimum permissions necessary to perform each of the actions. So we use the DevOps approach and keep in mind the very strict requirements of many customers when it comes to identity and access management, user data, and customer proprietary information. We also recognize that the IAM system is not complete without all the pieces around the identity and access management core products. This includes the ability to monitor all of the systems, operate them, and gather all auditable information from those systems. So we don't simply provide an IAM product for you to customize. We provide an identity and access management solution that has all of the typical capabilities of an enterprise-ready system. These, as I mentioned earlier, can be deployed into multiple cloud environments, into your own environment or ours, and into a number of different cloud providers.
All right, that sounds great, Tim. So with the approach Tim described, we have already solved a few of the problems we mentioned earlier regarding the deployment in different regions, the implementation complexity or the operational overhead. Through the high rate of automation, these problems are gone for us. So there are still a few problems missing, which we want to talk about now. So first of all, let's have a look at the traveler issue, which is caused by multiple user accounts. The solution here is that Service Layers offers an intelligent user roaming, which means that the user is able to log in every region, and the availability of the data depends on the legal evaluation of the Service Layer's customers. So depends on the customer which piece of data is stored. And sometimes it might be that the user needs to re-enter some critical data because they don't want to, or you as a customer don't want to pre-populate this information. But in the end, the user does not have to re-register and go through the whole registration process again just when he travels across in another region. So the user can use the same account everywhere, and the data is managed by the intelligent user roaming approach. So this problem is solved. Let's have a look at the next one and the problem with tokens issued by other regions. We see here, we have a mobile app in this example, and we have an authorization server, and the mobile app wants to access an API, which is protected by an API gateway. So what's happening, the mobile app is requesting a token from the authorization server, using that token to access the API. So the API gateway in between takes the token, is performing the validation according to the token introspection specification, and afterwards the API gateway allows the request and the mobile app gets its data. So this is working fine in our scenario. But what happens if we talk about not only one region where we have our authorization server, but we are now in a several region with our mobile app, and we're using the same token, trying to access the API through the API gateway. But here we have an issue that the API gateway is not getting a valid response because the authorization server in the different region here does not know the token. So normally you wouldn't be able to access the API. There are two approaches. The first approach would be to use value tokens, which are signed and maybe encrypted, but this encryption leads to a whole overhead, a process overhead, because then you have to define how the shared keys are distributed with all your partners. And here comes the second approach, which we have at service layers, and this is the global token processing trust, which means that every authorization server which is deployed in every region is able to validate tokens issued by another region. And with this scenario, you can use your tokens everywhere, and it doesn't matter in which region you are now, and you don't have to try to get new tokens in another region. So this was our second issue. And now it's still the one missing regarding the support limited to the working hours. And Tim will tell you a few things about the solution we have here in place.
So we've recognized that even with a fully managed or fully tailored identity and access management system that users can use from everywhere, there are two big areas where it's great when users of the system or application owners that want to participate in an identity and access management system really need some help. So one of the primary areas where application owners especially need help and usually contact somebody in the support staff is onboarding their application or getting their application to participate in an identity and access management scheme. So this is where we've created an application owner portal, which makes onboarding applications like shopping for identity and access management. An application can register themselves, ask for the type of identity and access management participation they would like to have, and then receive the configuration necessary to bring their application into the single sign-on and identity and access management umbrella provided by an organization. This means that the application owners can service themselves instead of relying upon additional staff that may not be in the same region and waiting for them to provide technical details of how to bring their application up to speed. So this has allowed us in some cases to onboard several thousand applications at individual customers, primarily with the self-service activities of the application owners themselves. The second area is where we want to have users not managing applications, but users that manage users. This is a very typical scenario where team leads or managers need to bring on new people. And having self-service through delegated administration of users means that there's no requirement for support staff to participate in the user onboarding process. It doesn't mean that there is no oversight of the process, but it does mean that we can spread the load of bringing users on board to the people that know the users the best. And the personal relationship of a team lead or a manager with their users or a dealer with their employees helps ensure that the right users are getting the right permissions and all users get access in a timely manner to the applications that they should have access to. The other aspect I want to mention here is the ability to not only localize these applications for different languages, but of course, to tailor them for different regions that may have different requirements. So that's a very important aspect of regional implementation of identity and access management that is usually left to a large implementation project to determine how to implement custom applications that can be tailored for regional differences. And this can be everything from the types of information that you're allowed to ask people for to the formatting of a person's name. So that solves our last big issue that we see in the distributed identity and access management environment, where not having the ability to self-manage means that organizations must rely upon centralized staff or must have people ready to answer questions all the time. That doesn't mean that there is no support. Of course there is, but it simply means that we can shift the requirement to the people that know the problems the best. And in many cases, self-service is the way to go.
So then, thanks a lot. I think we've come to an end. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us, and I think we can give you more information about this stuff. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks.